3. So that's oh, I'm really bad at counting, because usually when I do this, I'm not actually counting out the entire thing. I'm going in segments of 3 because I know I'm working with workshops that are 3 by 3 sized. But we'll let them do that. And as far as farming goes, I'm actually going to over here, because the plan is to put a small building over the downward stairway into there. That way I can turn it into a choke point and defend it. And then over here on this other side, since you can use sand for farming without any irrigation or anything fancy, I'll put the farms up here below 1 level, but not near the entryway. So to actually get up to the farms, you have to go through the fort, and that way it's a lot safer than if I were to just like go down here and have them separate outside. Although I could feasibly just like build the building out so that you still have to go through my choke point, but that's the way I tend to like to do it, is to go from below up into where I want my farms to be, rather than down from outside. And that only applies because I have soil and, or that only works if you have soil, sand, or clay, because those can just take farm plots without any extra steps. If you don't have those things, you have to get water over all of the tiles you want for farm plots, which isn't as hard as it sounds, but it is a whole process. So that's why I wanted somewhere with a layer of one of those things so I could make farms easier. So we have our miners, and this is why some people would take like even 3 miners, because it would just make this go faster. And unfortunately, while you're designating, it's paused, but I'm going to go ahead and figure out how I'm going to do this over here. So up, you up, J down, you up, J down. Then I will make a little area around here. And the reason that these tiles are blinking with a blue, what would you call that? I don't know, double tilde, is that these are wet tiles. The river here is the kind of moving blue double tildes and single tildes. And so any underground tile that's next to them is wet, which means the dwarves will automatically stop digging if they hit it, as to avoid flooding the fort. You can still make them dig it anyway, but it's something to kind of keep you from accidentally hitting some water that you didn't know was there and flooding your fort. Because water is simulated, and so is things like water pressure and stuff, although it does have some weird quirks. So Dwarf Fortress is a bit of a slow game, which is one of the things I like about it. It doesn't require like constant manic attention. You can kind of come in and put down some things and give out some designations and tell the dwarves to make some items, and then you can, you know, get up and go do something else. Or a lot of times I'll play Dwarf Fortress in a window and, you know, watch something or listen to something. But they're finished with those 2 little areas for the workshops. So I'm going to go B, W to get back to the workshops. And then I'm going to do, on this side, masons. And when you hit enter on the thing you want to build, it will then ask you what you want to build it out of. So, and it's listed from closest to farthest. So the closest thing is this rock that this layer is made out of, shirt. There's one 0 distance away, and there's 14 available on the map. And that's fine. Workshops aren't worth much, so it doesn't really matter what you make them out of. Usually you can make them out of stone or wood. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter, and it will use 1 shirt to make that. And then I'm going to also put in a mechanics workshop, because that mostly also uses stone. And you could even put in a craft stores workshop if you want one that's just going to be making stuff out of stone. That's something I've done a few times. But I think I will put that in a separate place later. All right, so now that we got those 2 workshops that use stone, I'm going to go back to my stockpiles, and then I'm going to hit stone, S for stone, and I'm going to make that area right in front of those 2 workshops stone stockpiles. So dwarves will automatically bring anything to that stockpile that it is supposed to have, and they will keep doing that until it's full. You can also push Q, which, oh, what did the game call that again? Set building task preferences. And if you go over a stockpile, you get a little menu, and one of the things you can do is change the settings with S. And you can go in and add or remove things. I actually don't want metal ores, and this menu is a little weird because there's enable, disable, allow all, block all, and permit and forbid, and those all do things at different levels. So if I hit disable here, it'll just disable stone, whereas if I push F for forbid, it will take off the one thing. So, but I do just want economic and other, because neither of those shops can make anything out of metal ores, so I want them to go near the shops that can use them. And I don't think I'll even have clay because there's not on this map, but again, that's something I would want to be somewhere else, because even though you can make things at those workshops out of it, I would rather use it for something else usually. Another important thing while I'm still on the stockpile is it says max barrel, max bin, and max wheelbarrow, and that's how many of those things the stockpile is allowed to have. And it's really important for stone stockpiles. Well, it's not super important, but it's important for stone stockpiles that you give them at least one wheelbarrow, because stones are very heavy, and if the dwarf has to carry it by hand, it will take them a long time. But if they have a wheelbarrow, they can put it in the wheelbarrow and just wheel it over. There's also some other more advanced settings. I wouldn't worry about what it'll take from or what it'll give to, but if you want to really streamline your industries, you can mess with that stuff to only get certain objects moving around in certain ways. So I'm going to do something similar on the other side, except with different workshops, obviously. And see that wood that is... oh, am I losing my voice? Excuse me. That wood that's in the stockpile in the hallway is actually closer than the shirt. So I am going to want to go ahead and do that, because wood is a little more valuable than stone generally, because there's still plenty of it on this map, but more often than not, like, stone is basically everywhere, whereas trees can be more or less common. Also on here, let's see, what also uses wood? Bowyers use wood, but I don't really have a good reason to make anything, or make any wooden crossbows right now. So I'm going to go back to the general list of buildables, and I'm going to hit E to go to furnaces. I want a wood furnace. Did I not make that the right size? How silly of me. Well, now that door is forever in the wrong place, and it will haunt me for the rest of my life. Let's see, I could have sworn there was another one I wanted. I think it is the Bowyer's workshop. And at the Bowyer's workshop, you can make crossbows. Dwarves don't use bows. And I don't know why they would. They're like, you know, silly elf weapons. So, and you can also make metal crossbows at the appropriate workshop for making metal weapons and armor, which is why usually I don't even bother with the Bowyer's workshop, because I don't tend to take or use hunters very much. But I'll go ahead and put one of those in anyway. Interestingly, though, because I didn't put it back far enough either. Boy, my counting is off today. So, if you want to get rid of a workshop, it's the same way you get rid of a wagon. You go over it in your... what is it called again? I keep forgetting. Set building tasks and preferences with Q, and you push X. I'll just go ahead and... the ones that weren't built yet just disappear, and the other ones will have the appropriate dwarf come and fix it. Right, now up here where the farms are going to go, I'm going to have this area around the staircase be the stockpile and the farmer's workshop, which is a workshop that deals with animals and plants generally. I'm going to go ahead and make that about this big. Try to keep that consistently sized. And then I'm going to have, running off the side here, some plots, or some rooms for plots rather, And you can make them a lot bigger. You don't actually need that many, especially if you didn't bring many plants, but I would like to have a few so that I can make sure I'm growing everything that I need. And what the heck, I'll even stagger them asymmetrically just for fun. We'll go ahead and put in 6, and again, X is remove designations, so that works on mining or anything you do from the designate menu. And a lot of these things, like the way I'm laying out rooms and the sizes I'm making them and stuff, aren't even necessarily something I'm doing because of some rhyme or reason. It might just be I started doing it that way at one point, and it's just kind of become a habit at this point. So we got that going. So once that has finished, we can start growing food. And then because the farm is directly above this stairwell, I'm going to make this the food storage and kitchen area. And I'm sure well, I know I've already done it because I messed up on those workshops, but I like to make things in 3x3 spacings usually. That's not 3x3, that's 2x3. Just because I know, again, I know this is going to have workshops in it, and that'll keep it nice and consistently sized if I can count like a human being. And I know as you play this game, you start to develop habits and pet peeves and all sorts of things, so I'm not super duper organized. I know there's programs you can get and people who will plan out the entire fort before they even start. I tend to sort of have preset areas in my mind that I just kind of connect in ways that make sense to me, rather than trying to map out everything at once. So like all the workshops, I'm going to continue putting workshops on this floor. This area I've kind of laid out a few times, so I have some idea of how I want it to go. But where it goes depends on, you know, like where the fort is and things like that. There's also something that I like just about having every workshop out and available, even if I'm not necessarily going to use it for anything. So, and I'm putting the wood furnace here again just because the wood storage is going to be right there, and the wood furnace obviously burns wood to do things. Stockpile, wood, do that. S on there. I just like to double check when I use the presets. And yeah, wood is just wood of every kind of tree. And so this is one of those things where it might seem complicated or like overwhelming that every kind of wood is listed here, but there's usually not a reason to even like bother looking at it. It's just one of the ways that the game like gives you a possibility to have control. So again, it's one of those things where it's not really complex in the sense that you need to know a lot. It's complex in the sense that you have a lot of control over these two systems that are interacting. You have stockpiles and, you know, the trees, the trees that grow in nature in Dwarf Fortress land. I've already forgotten the name of this world, but this world does have a name, so I could have called it that, but I want to keep mining, so I still have stone, and then I'm going to go and hit Q for, I'm just going to stop saying what it's called. You get it by now. I'm going to go Q, menu, to the Mason's Workshop, and if you want a workshop to do something, you press A to add a new task. Don't worry about that red text that says profile requires manager. The profile is something that just gives you even more control over the workshop. It lets you say only certain people can use it and stuff like that. So it's not even something I usually bother with because usually I don't like that much control. I don't like micromanaging that much personally. So you press A, and this will then list all of the things the workshop can make. And so some of the things I'm going to want early are tables and chairs, because I want to set up a dining room, probably close to that stairwell that comes down from the kitchen. Then I will want doors. Those are very nice. And let's see. I think we'll leave it at that for now. And I remembered why I like to put the... So now both of these workshop areas are going to be horribly ugly, but I am going to put a Craft Dwarf's station in there just because there's lots of things that a Craft Dwarf's station can make out of stone that I want to be able to make right now, and I don't really want to lay out where I would put the Craft Store station otherwise. So let's see. I wonder where my miners are. So if I want to find a dwarf, I can push U, and this will bring up the list of all of the living things, I guess, for lack of a better term, all the animals, visitors, neutral or hostile, everything. And you see on the citizen screen that we're on, it lists all the dwarves and what they're doing. So most of my dwarves right now don't have a job because, you know, I'm not set up yet, so there's nothing for them to do. But the miners, they both say dig. So if I want to go to the miner, I can press Z to go to unit. So I'm going to do that, and it will jump to where he is, and it looks like he is mining right here. It puts your cursor right on him, and the view unit page is open and set to the last thing I was looking at. And if I go back to G for general, I can see that he's already actually improved his mining skill. He's gone from an adequate miner to a skilled miner. Mining levels up very quickly, and the better at mining a dwarf is, the faster they mine. That's it. It used to be that the mining skill actually affected how many rocks you would produce. So a really good miner would always get a rock, but a not so good miner would not always get a rock. And that was ridiculous because it made lots and lots of rocks. And now it's just like static, just things always make the same amount of rocks. All right, I just got a damp stone warning, and you can see it's already canceled some of my designations, and I just got another one. And that's because the river is above this big room. And that's safe just because there is a ceiling or floor, depending on which side you're on, floor, ceiling, between the water and this room. So it's still damp because there's water above it. It's still adjacent, but that water is not going to spill through unless I either dig up into the ceiling or somehow dig down through the bottom of the river. So you see it's got the little tildes for being wet. I'm just going to go ahead and tell them to go over that, and I will unfortunately have to sit here and keep redesignating because they're going to cancel every time they see the damp stone. Oh, there's even metal. But it is safe to dig below water as long as I said you don't dig upwards. So if I, for instance, dug a upward stair and then a downward stair into this floor of the river and the ceiling of this room, I would in fact start flooding. Damn, so looking. Unfortunately, it also pauses. I think you might be able to mess with that in the configuration somewhere, but I kind of like leaving it on just because you never know once you start digging deeper if you're going to hit something you didn't know about. And sometimes that auto pause can save your fort from flooding because it gives you enough time to react to it and do something about it. Alright, so they should go ahead and finish that, and I will go ahead and start putting down my cooking workshops. So W, and for the kitchen, I like obviously the kitchen, and that is where normal food is, or that's just where food is prepared.